All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar, From Peer to Leader, Navigating the Pitfalls of the First-Time Supervisor. My name is Courtney Allison, and I'm the Southeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be the host and question moderator today. Our presenter this morning is Edra Waterman, Director of Hamilton East Public Library. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. This webinar is provided as a part of the Indiana Library Leadership Academy project, Ready to Lead, the INLLA Leadership Toolkit. To register for other webinars available for this theme or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current training menu, please see our continuing education website. The Indiana State Library has many ways we try to stay connected with library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about the Indiana State Collection, interview spotlights on library staff from across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. If you have questions, just type them in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. I'll be watching and get your questions to Edra as soon as there's a good opportunity, and there should also be time near the end for questions. This session is 1 hour, so you'll get 1 LEU for today. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to put a link on the screen for your LEU, so be sure to stay signed in until the end so you can download your LEU. I'll also be putting a survey link in the chat box at the end of the presentation. Please take the time to fill that out and let us know how we're doing. For people attending today, I will send out the recording of the presentation in case you'd like to refer back to it, and I'll do that in the next couple of weeks. If at any point during the webinar you experience any sound issues, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box on the left side of the screen. If there's a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat box. If you're unable to resolve the sound issues you're experiencing, we are recording the meeting and you can watch it after the meeting has ended. Again, if there is a global sound issue, we will make an announcement in the chat box. Without further ado, I turn it over to Edra Waterman.
Good morning, everybody. It's weird. I'm used to doing this in front of actual humans, not just humans online. But thank you for tuning in, dialing in, connecting in, whatever it is today. I'm really excited to talk with you guys today. Like Courtney said, I'm Edra Waterman. I'm from Hamilton East Public Library. I've been in library administration now for, oh my God, like 13 years, which is insane. But I did at one time, experience what this webinar is about, which is going from being one of the gang to being the leader of the gang, and I know that that can be very uniquely stressful. The information in this presentation will also be useful for really anyone who is involved in supervision or leadership at any level in the work that you do. So hopefully some of these tips will be useful depending on where you are in your career. I would like to ask to get an idea of who's on the webinar. So if you could in the chat box just really quickly say whether, are you like beginner, intermediate, or experienced when it comes to leadership and supervision, and then so I can get kind of an idea of where you're coming from. I'll keep talking while you chat, and Courtney will let me know. So for those of you who are new to supervision or management, welcome to the dark side, right? So we've all been in the situation where as frontline staff, you come in and you kind of have this perception that the person in charge of you knows more than you do, and while sometimes that's true, it's also true that we're all in this together, and the best part of true leadership is the fact that you need to lead from within. You're not in the sled mushing on the sled dogs. You're that lead sled dog. Help and pull that sled at the same time that you're going in the direction that you want everybody to follow you.
So it looks like we have a lot of beginners and just some intermediate and some advanced.
Okay, that's good. Hopefully this will be pretty good for all of that. The way it's structured is I'm a big fan of lists. So what I will go through are basically 2 top 10 lists, and it'll be top 10 things to avoid, which I will whip through pretty quickly because I don't like focusing on the negative, but I do want to remind everybody here of things that can really derail you, especially as a new supervisor, in connecting with your staff. And then we'll go through in a little more depth 10 things to do, 10 things that you need to do to prepare to be that great boss, to be that person that you always wanted to work for. So we'll start with the negative. And if you have any questions, just stick them in the chat box, and Courtney will, grab my arm and go, will you stop talking for 2 minutes so I can get these questions in? And if you want to say, I don't agree, or that's nonsense, or what do you mean by that, please do, because this webinar is for you. Okay, mistakes to avoid. And I'm a big fan of cheesy clip art, so you'll see a lot of it. First of all, thinking nothing has to change. So this is especially true if you're promoted from within. So if you are a member of a team and for one reason or another your direct supervisor has moved on, or that position's open and you're promoted into it, it's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, great, now I'm in charge. I can make everything better, and I can keep all of my relationships exactly like they are. That's really not true. It doesn't mean that you have to give up friendships that you've made over the years with your colleagues, but what it does mean is that you have to face the fact that when you're out at the bowling alley drinking beer and knocking down a few pins, that you can't participate in the healthy bashing of library administration that you are so accustomed to doing at those events. So you've got to keep in mind that your role is different now, and you want to continue to be social with your friends, but you've just got to make sure that you are sure that you are not crossing those lines that now exist that never did before. So it's really hard, and it's really easy to fall into those habits, but you've got to figure out, okay, where am I going to see friction, and face the fact that things are going to be different. Your relationships will change with the folks that you work with. Wanting everyone to like you. Aw, we all want everyone to like us, right? I mean, this is human nature. Who wants to be hated? Who has had a boss that everybody hates? And how much fun is it in the break room to talk about, how dumb he is, or how his mustache is weird, or how her shoes are always the wrong color, or whatever. I'm totally making all this up. But wanting everyone to like you is a quick path to unhappiness and destruction and despair. So while you don't want to be a martinet, you also need to be sure that you remember why you're there. And if you are in a supervisory role, if you are leading a department, if you're leading a team, your job is not to have everybody like you, to make everybody happy. Your job is to advance the goals and objectives of the organization. Your job is to get to the outcomes that you were hired to get to. And sometimes that means you have to make tough decisions, and sometimes that means you're not going to make a lot of friends. Doesn't mean you have to be, mean. It just means that you have to remember that your job is not to be liked. Your job is to produce outcomes. Make sense? I don't know. I can't see the chat. Okay, buying into the hype. Sorry, this is weird for me. I'm used to seeing people. Buying into the hype. So it's great. You got promoted. You're wonderful. You're awesome, right? A whole group of people has told you, we want you. You are chosen. You are the best. You are awesome. You can do this. You can. So don't buy into that. I mean, you need to be confident in your abilities, and you were chosen to do this job. But if you go into a situation, whether it's a promotion from within, or whether you've been, oh my God, the best, recruited from another organization and told, we have selected you because we liked your work, you can really easily let that go to your head. And what that means is, if you've bought into your own hype, people are going to be able to smell that all over you when you come in and assume that your ideas have the sun shining on them, and that you have no need to know about what's going on in this organization specifically. You have no need to get input from your staff because you are awesome and you are wonderful. So watch out for that. Be self-aware enough to watch your own behavior and figure out, okay, am I falling into that trap of assuming I know best? Am I talking to my staff? Am I learning about this organization? Or am I just buying into my own hype? And that never works. I mean, you have to be confident though, but don't buy into the hype. This is a good one too. How many of you, and I won't see the responses, but think about this. How many times have you worked for someone who ignores what's happening? Like pretends they don't see Suzanne, oh I'm sorry, there's a real Suzanne, Suzette coming in 10 minutes late every day and nothing ever happens. And you come in 10 minutes early every day and how come Suzanne can do that or Suzette can do that and you can't? So as the supervisor, as the boss, as the leader, you can't pretend you don't see things because all of those little problems will eventually escalate into big problems. So make sure that you are paying attention and you're making note. It doesn't mean you have to intervene every time some little thing happens, but you have to pay attention and you have to document and you have to make sure that if this becomes a bigger issue, you've got the ammunition you need to have a conversation with someone to make it stop. If you ignore the small stuff, it turns into big stuff. Pretty simple, right? This is all common sense, you would think. Well, on the other hand, you also don't want to be a doormat. So you need to notice these things are happening, right? And you don't always have to intervene, like I said, but you also aren't there to let people run roughshod over you. So basically a lot of managers, and you hopefully have never experienced this, but a lot of managers suffer from the syndrome of whoever talked to me last. So whoever talked to them last is the one who gives them the information they use to move forward. And that's part, in my opinion, of being a doormat, is allowing whoever talked to you last to lead the department instead of you. So watch for that. Make sure that you're not just agreeing to everything that anybody comes into you with, and that you are really thinking through, okay, in our vision for this department, is this idea that this person had, or is what this person is saying, does that fit in? Not just agreeing with everybody. This goes back up to wanting everybody to like you. So being a doormat is a quick way to both, you think it's going to have people like you when you let them do whatever they want, but what happens is you lose all respect and then nobody likes you. So it's just a big spiral of negativity. So watch out for that. Fun, aren't these positive? Woo! Okay, who's worked for the person who never makes a decision? And I don't see the chat, but I'm assuming we all have. It's incredibly frustrating when the person who is the decision maker will not pick a lane and help you go forward. You can't move forward unless you know what direction you're going. And that means that, like it or not, you've been promoted, you've been hired in to do a job, and your job is to have the buck stop at your desk. So you have got to make decisions. It doesn't mean you have to make snap decisions, but what it does mean is you need to set a timeline and give your staff the courtesy of answering their questions and providing a decision in a timely fashion.
So we have both yes and no for that question.
Some people have, some people haven't.
Yeah.
So Monica, congratulations. I see it's that you haven't, and that's great. Maybe there's a downside to that too, but don't hesitate. Your job is to make that choice and own that decision. Thinking you are always right. Okay, so you have to make the decisions, but sometimes, even though it's your responsibility, sometimes you're going to screw it up, right? And that doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that you can't assume that everything you do turns to gold. This goes back to buying into the hype a bit. You are not always going to be right, and that's okay. You have to own that decision, and you have to move on. Don't hide in your office. So it's tempting for those of us that are fortunate enough to have an office. Hiding in it sometimes seems like a really great idea, right? You know, nobody's going to bother me. I'll be in my office. And while it is true that there are things that you as a supervisor, a manager, will need to do in private, there are also a lot of times when you need to be out supporting your staff. So there is a balance here. So there's a difference between working in your office and hiding in your office. So working in your office is fine. Make sure that you are managing your own work so that when you have things that you need to be doing, you're not saving all of that work to happen at 3:30 on a Thursday afternoon when all the kids get out of school. You need to be out on the desk with your staff at busy times, and managing your work in your office will help you with that. Plus, your people that work with you need to know what you look like too, and so if you're in your office all the time, it's hard for them to know that. And this does get more complex as you move up in an organization, but I think it's most critical for those frontline managers who have staff who have to face the public, and if they're never out of their office facing the public side by side, that can cause problems. Don't be a jerk. This is actually probably, I mean, these last two are really the most important two things to remember, things to avoid when you're the supervisor. There's no reason to be a jerk. There is no reason on the earth that you have to be mean about someone's schedule or about having a difficult conversation with someone or redirecting their behavior. You don't have to be a jerk. You can find ways to connect with people. You need to bring a lot of empathy to the table when, especially if you're talking about disciplinary action or you're doing a schedule. You've got to put yourself in the shoes of your staff, and you've got to make sure that you're being understanding and firm, but you're not just being a jerk. You're not being arbitrary. You're not stomping around like Tina Fey. I am the boss. I am the boss. That is not your job, even though you're the boss. Sorry. And this is really important too. This is probably one of the most important things for all of us at any level, is keep in mind that this is work. It's not about you personally. It's not about when someone disagrees with a decision you've made, or when you do a schedule and you know, Bob is in the back weeping because he didn't get the Saturday off he wants, and it's not about you as a person. It's about what's happening at work. It's business. This is business. It's not personal. It's just like The Godfather says, you know. You're Tony Soprano here. It's not business. Sometimes you have to beat up the guy who did the wrong thing, but it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. So just remember Q-tip. Quit taking it personally, and it will help you feel better about many of the things that happen at work. The same thing's true when you're dealing with customers, too, when you're dealing with patrons who come in and just rip you up one side and down the other. It's never about you. It's always about them. It's about what happened to that person before they interacted with you, and the same thing's true of being a manager. Sometimes you'll be the target of your staff's ire or their dissatisfaction, but it's not about you. It's about the business. It's about what's happening, and part of how to mitigate some of these things and some of this dissatisfaction with people is being able to explain things. And we'll get into that when we get to the good 10, which is things you should do. And hopefully this will give you some tools going forward.
We have a lot of people chiming in saying this is the hard one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Taking it personally. And I would say too that you know, it's not like we picked libraries because it's all sexy and full of money, right? A lot of us are in the library world because we love the concept of what we do, and we love the idea of what a library means, and this whole idea of leveling the playing field and freedom and making sure that all people at all levels in all walks of life have the same access to materials and services and resources they need to make their lives better. This is why we do this. It is very personal on a number of levels. But please remember that it's not you that the person in front of you is mad at. It's the situation. And as a manager, one of the great things is you have some level of control over that situation. Not ultimate control, but you have more than you did, and maybe you can help with that. But please remember, it's not about you. If you take it personally, it's going to get in your way.
Monica says that's why she did get into libraries.
Yay, Monica. I think we all did, right? I mean, even if you fell into it backwards because you got a part-time job in circulation and then you're like, oh my God, these are my people. You still, you did it. There's something about what we do and why we do it that resonates with a lot of us. And it is hard to keep it separate from me, Edra, when I'm called names. Because I have, this is just a short little story. In where I am now in Hamilton East, we've had a lot of resistance to some renovation we're doing. And a column in our newspaper, they actually compared us negatively to Nazis. So I, Edra Waterman, am worse than Nazis because we're weeding our collection. Because they didn't know any better, and the librarians should. So I feel like in many ways I've leveled up as a librarian to be named individually, as the reason the library is being destroyed, but I'm not taking it personally. It's kind of hard being called a Nazi, but I'm not taking it personally because it would totally spike my ability to do what I know is right for this community and what I know is right for this library. Okay, soapbox over. So what do, right? We know what we need to avoid. What do we do? Actions to take. Know your stuff. This is a big one for me. When you are promoted, when you're in a leadership position, it is absolutely 100% critical that you make sure that you know what you're doing. So if you are new to management, because I don't know about your curriculum in in pursuing your advanced degree in library science, I'm not sure what your curriculum looked like, but mine was pretty thin on supervision and management. So ask for training. If you've been promoted into a new role, if you've been hired by another institution, if you are a first-time supervisor or manager, those 1 or 2 day trainings that you can get through all kinds of sources are really helpful because they don't teach us how to document, right? They don't teach us about specific observable behaviors in our MLS classes, or in undergrad if you're someone who has a bachelor's degree. Or in high school, if you're someone with a high school diploma. Nobody teaches you that, right? So get a good basic overview of supervision and management if you haven't had one. And that, I would say that's true at whatever level you're at. If you're an experienced manager but you've never had formal training, it's probably worth your time and your library's money to do one of these 1 or 2 day seminars. If you can't afford that, if your library is small and or unwilling to do that, there's a lot of webinars out there, there's a lot of information out there. The 1 Minute Manager is kind of a good place to start for a quick and easy read that has some good tips in it. But get that training. You don't come out of the womb understanding how to write a performance appraisal, for God's sake. It's a skill that you develop, and it's important. So ask for training and do it immediately if you're in a new role. Reread the staff handbook. I'm a big stickler for this because here's the thing. Now that you're the manager, guess what? Your staff are going to line up at your door asking you things like, can I wear these sparkly flip-flops? Is it okay if I clock in from home before I go to the daycare to do the story time? They're going to ask you, is it okay if I have my gun locked in the trunk of my car? They're just going to ask you all kinds of crazy questions that are answered in your staff handbook. And if your organization or library doesn't have one, get thee to a website and download one and have your board approve it. Most people do now. It's not as big a deal as it was when I started doing this, oh my God, 15 years ago. But it's really important for you as the manager to understand and know that handbook, even if it doesn't make sense, and even if it's just being familiar enough with it that when someone comes in and says, can I wear capri pants with strings, that rings a bell somewhere in your head that, weirdly enough, there is a comment in our handbook on capri pants with strings. I'll have to check. So make sure that you are aware of what those rules are and what is in that handbook. Does that make sense? I'll wait for whatever. Oh, I see a comment, that dusty thing on the high shelf. Shame on you. It's your friend. Your handbook is your friend. No, I'm just kidding. And keep in mind that you are responsible for your own information-seeking behavior. Nobody's going to come in your office with the big secret book of management and hand it over when you inhabit a new role. You're kind of on your own here. A lot of times you'll have a supportive administrator who is supervising you as a manager. But if you're the administrator, if you're the library director, and it's a library that's small, or you're a library of one, it's me, myself, and I here. So you have got to make sure that you are proactive in seeking this information and looking for training and understanding the handbook and understanding what a library is, what good supervision is, what are our goals. Memorize the strategic plan, memorize the vision statement or the mission statement so that you understand what it's all about. And your job as a leader is to connect the dots for your staff from their work to that mission so that every single decision that you make runs through that. And in order to do that, you're going to have to seek that information. Nobody's going to spoon feed that to you now that you're in leadership. Does that make sense? You probably all knew that already, but anyway. Is it the truth? So I was in Rotary for many years, and the thing that drew me to Rotary instead of Kiwanis or Lions or any one of those other, wonderful community organizations was the four-way test. And a big part of the four-way test is it the truth? Because you as the manager, as the leader, as a human being, as a professional, as a librarian, we are in the truth business. And it can be hard when you're a supervisor because you are privy to information and planning and strategies that the rest of the staff isn't yet. And that is not inappropriate. So when someone asks you a question that you can't answer, for God's sake, don't lie. Don't make something up. Don't say you don't know if you know. What you can say is, that's a great question. We are working on an answer to that, and I'll let you know as soon as I can. But please be assured that the library understands that that's an issue and we're working on it. You can be honest. I can't talk about that. I'm sorry, I can't discuss that with you. I apologize. You have to be honest. You have to be honest.
Monica says, is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Is it fair?
Yes. Is it the truth? I can't remember the fourth one. Is it fair to all concerned? Anyway.
Type in here.
There's a fourth one. But yeah, the four-way test is my favorite thing. I have it on a coaster on my desk. And it's really a great way to look at the business that you do and the things that are happening. I think that in our current climate, in our world, everybody could use a reminder of the four-way test. So be honest, I'm not keeping up with the PowerPoint, without spilling your guts. So again, you have to be honest when people ask you questions, but sometimes the answer to that question can be, I'm sorry, I can't discuss it with you. You absolutely cannot talk about some things with your staff, and those things include all the personnel stuff. That goes without saying. You can't talk to person A about person B. And this kind of goes back to things to avoid, like when I talked about not ignoring behaviors. Not ignoring behaviors doesn't mean when a behavior comes to your attention from person A about person B that you run back to person A and said, oh, thanks for letting me know I took care of it. No, they might never know what you did. You just have to be sure that you addressed it. You're not going to report back to your staff on when they rat out other staff, and people need to understand that. That's just an aside, kind of a best practice. Communicate. So in the little sidebar, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you struggle with communication in your organization? Just type yes if you do. It's a problem. It's really funny because the chat bar is exploding right now. And you guys can probably see it. But yeah, we all struggle with this. Communication is one of those things that is never done. It's never fixed. It's never perfect. It's never going to be where we want it. Ever, never, never. Unto the end of time, amen. But as a supervisor, you owe it to your staff and you owe it to your library and to your department to make sure that you are communicating what you expect explicitly to your staff. Don't just assume, because we're all in this together and we're all serving this community, that what success looks like is the same for everyone. But it also doesn't mean giving people like 48-page checklists of what to do when a patron approaches them. Step 1, smile. Step 2, stand up. Step 3, ask them if they need help. Step 4, no, you don't want to micromanage, right? You don't want to be crazy about it. But you do need to make sure that you are explicitly providing the outcomes that you want. We want all of our patrons coming into the library to have an exceptional experience that makes them feel better when they leave than when they came in. That's a very general statement, but it's a pretty clear expectation, which indicates I need you to do whatever you have to do to make that patron's day better. And how you do that and what that looks like when you interact with someone is going to be different than what that looks like when I interact with someone. But if you don't provide the expectation, then you're setting your staff up for failure. And the only way to do that is to communicate. And how many of you have worked for the person who assumes that you're in their head? Because I might kind of be that person. I mean, I struggle with this because I think it all through. I have a long drive. I have an hour and 15-minute drive to work every day. And I think it all through on my way. And I'm like, oh, that's great. We're going to do that. And then sometimes I fail to communicate that process with the folks that I talk to then later, and then I have to back up, blah, blah, blah. So it's very important to be mindful of the fact that people are not in your head. They can't read your mind. Just because you looked at something and had a thought doesn't mean it was magically projected out to the folks that is your team to make it happen.
Someone says there are so many details, it's sometimes hard to remember what you told people.
Oh, Word. Yeah, with the library I'm at now has 120 staff and 2 buildings, and it is complicated when you have a lot of people. Even if you have 6, right? You can't remember if Brenda came in on Thursday and you told her, or if she took that day off. She usually works on Thursday. Did she miss the department meeting? It is really difficult. So that's why it's important to be mindful, to not ever rest on your laurels. If you have a positive experience with communication, don't ever stop. Don't assume just because you sent an email, everybody saw it. Even though, you would think if you sent an email that everybody saw it, but not always the case. So
we have a question.
Yeah.
How do you balance having others read your mind and communicating clear enough?
So, okay, so I'm a little confused by the question. Does it mean that how do you balance what if you over-communicate, or how do you balance micromanaging with communication? Is that the question? Like, how do you know if you're being...
Yes.
Okay, so I would say the big difference there is intent and content. So I don't think there's any such thing as over-communication. So if there's information to be had and you send it out in email, then you have a department meeting, and then you talk one-on-one with people, I think that's fine. Where it rolls into micromanagement is when you send something out and you say, here's what we're doing, do you have any questions? And people do that in their own way, and then you get another email that says, no, that's not what I meant. I meant for you to do it this exact way. So that's the difference. That's not the same as communicating. That's micromanaging. So communicating the information out in multiple ways is what you want to do. But responding to someone's action based on your communication by saying, no, that's not what I meant, do it this way, is not the same as communicating it again. I don't know if that's helpful, but you don't have to be as detailed in how you want people to do it. Just stick with what is it we want to have happen with this? What is the new procedure? Where are there areas where people can kind of bring their own flair, and where are there things that have to be done in a certain way? And I think providing that background and that information in the communication can help with that. So if it's a State Board of Accounts rule that we have to write the fee down on a piece of paper, turn around in a circle and clap our hands, and then put it into the computer, then that needs to be communicated to you that this is a State Board of Account rule. You have to do these stupid things to meet their expectations, versus saying, hey, don't forget to write down the fee amount on the paper. We're having some problems with that. Boy, that probably didn't help at all. But anyway, so communicating out in repeated ways is important, but it's all about intent. It's all about what you intend to do and how you respond as a supervisor to the actions people take based on the communication they got from you. Oh my God. I don't know if that made sense at all. But anyway, but yeah, so just make sure that you let people that they know what they can tweak and what they can't when you do communicate your expectations. And sometimes you'll figure that as you go. A big key to not being a micromanager is not being a jerk. So as long as you can make sure you're not being a jerk, that will help. And share the work. You guys probably already know this, and you already have this down, because I think this is becoming less of a problem. At least I hope it is. But when you are, especially in a public service setting, when you're the manager, you need to make sure that when you're doing the schedule or when you're assigning tasks, that you include yourself in the stuff nobody wants to do. If filling the tax forms is the worst thing in the history of the world, then you should be doing that too. I myself have, who hasn't cleaned a bathroom, right? I've cleaned up more bodily whatevers than I ever wanted to as a library director and as a supervisor. So make sure that you're part of the team and that you're helping everybody do the things that they don't like doing. If nobody likes cutting scrap paper, share the work. Also, if you're a public service department, I hope you're working evenings and weekends. I'm sure you all are. But I know there are places where the manager doesn't do that, and that's not acceptable. Everybody needs to share those duties. Plus, you need to see what's going on Saturday in your library, or on Sunday if you're open on Sundays. because sometimes it's not good. And you need to make sure that people understand that the expectation is that our level of service does not slip on weekends. I worked at a library one time where nobody worked on weekends. They had the high school student pages staffed the whole library on weekends. It was completely insane. So as the leader, as the manager, as the library director, as the supervisor, include yourself so you can see what's happening. And always be willing to do anything. Honestly, you don't have to do it most of the time, but your staff need to understand that if there's a need, you will. You know, if somebody has to work on that Sunday because, so here's a good example. If you're not scheduled to work on a Saturday and 2 people call in sick and there's not enough staffing, guess whose butt needs to be on that desk? And that answer to that question, hint, hint, is yours, right? So as the leader of a department or a library or whatever, you're always on call, for better or for worse. It's your responsibility to cover that desk, and it's perfectly acceptable to call somebody in to do it, but at the end of the day, your staff need to be able to trust you to have their back. Does that make sense? Pretty obvious, this one. Oh, the Seidel. This is one of my favorite tools for managers. So it's pretty common, well, maybe not common, but it's not uncommon to approach a situation and observe that a staff person is having a hard time, that they're struggling with, for whatever reason, with whatever they're working on in a front-facing position. And what the Seidel will do is allow you to, I should know how to do this, but I totally don't. Will it allow you to intervene without, as we learned earlier, being a jerk, which is what you're not supposed to do as a manager. So what the Seidel is what I like to do is just kind of sidle up and say, hey, need some help? Can I help you? Can I help with this task? Because what's usually happening is a patron is getting bad information, or the staff member is unable to effectively handle that interaction anymore. And if you swoop in like an avenging angel and say, stop! You must stop giving this bad information. Go away. I will take care of it. Everybody's going to be mad when you get done. So what you can do with the Seidel is just make it very subtle. You intervene, you fix the problem, and then at that moment, as soon as that patron walks away, you just basically tell the staff member, hey, next time, let's do it this way, okay? And that way you don't have to call them in your office later, make it a bigger thing than it is. You've solved the problem, the patron has the right information, and your staff member feels like they know how to do it next time and that you're there to support them. So don't be afraid to intervene if there's a problem, but do it in a way where everybody ends up at the end of the interaction feeling like they've had a win. So the Seidel allows you to just kind of come up to someone, give them a little bit of a redirection, solve the problem, get the patron off their back, and move on with your day without having to have a big blow up. It's sort of like it's just a course correction. And if you hide in your office, this won't work. If people are used to you being around, the Seidel is a great tool. But if you only come out when there's a problem, guess what? Everybody knows that because I'm going to use Courtney, because Courtney's on the desk, somebody's butt's getting chewed. So it's important to be there for your staff enough that when you do need to redirect a behavior, you can do it in a way that's no big deal. Make sense? Good. Okay, learn to fur. This is a really weird picture, isn't it? But oh well, it's a maternity clinic. I don't know. So I went to a skill path seminar like, I don't know, 15 years ago. It was like communication for women or something in Indianapolis. And one of the things that they talked about was this concept of FIR, to provide feedback and to have a developmental disciplinary conversation with someone so you could gather your thoughts and make it have a positive outcome. So what FIR is fact, impact, respect, and request. And I'm not sure this is actually what these stand for because it's been a long time and this is what's in my head. But if you go to that seminar and it stands for something different, the intent is still the same. So whenever you have to have a disciplinary conversation with someone, it's really hard, right? Because How do you make sure that you say everything you want to say without creating tears, without being unfair, without putting that person in a defensive posture? How do you get what you want? And what FIR is really great about is doing exactly that. So if you focus on these 4 steps in any kind of a disciplinary interaction, it's going to, or not even disciplinary, even just when you want behavior to change, this will help you with that. So let's use a very simple example, which is we have an employee who has a problem getting to work on time. And we all have these employees, right? They're not late, like, catastrophically, but they're always clocking in right at 9:07. You know, because if you use a time clock, it goes to the next 15 minutes at 9:08. And these are people, library opens at 9, they're always cruising in between like 2 minutes after and 7 minutes after. So this has happened 3 times, and you need to have this needs to stop, right? You need this behavior to stop. So you call this person in, and you start with the fact. Christy, you have been late 5 times in the last 2 weeks. Impact. When you're not here in time to open the library at 9, it's really difficult for your coworkers to get everything done that needs to be done so that we're ready to greet the public when we open. Respect. I understand that your personal situation is stuff that you drop your kids off at school. I get it, because you've heard all these excuses, right? Because they've been making an excuse every time. I understand that it can be difficult with dropping your kids off at school and getting here on time. And then request. But I'm going to need you to be here and ready to work on the desk at 9 o'clock every day for the next 2 weeks. Does that make sense? So you can pretty much FIR anything. It really allows you to practice, because that's really important. When you're going to have this conversation with someone, you need to practice. And what the impact and respect bullet points will give you is the ability to kind of role play it to yourself, and you know what the excuses this person's going to have. And if you say that excuse, and if you call out that excuse and you also call out the reason it's not valid, hopefully that will spike their guns a bit. And usually what you'll get from them is, I'm sorry, I'll try a little harder. Because 5 minutes, come on, you can get in there. You can do that.
We have a question. What if it's something more soft skill, not such a hard fact, like an attitude?
So that's a little harder. And here's the thing. When you're talking about an attitude, that will manifest itself in behavior. So one of the things to remember whenever you're doing any kind of, when you're having a conversation with someone about something that they're doing that's getting in the way of the goals of the department, you have to bring it back to specific observable behaviors, SOBs. And yeah, I know that means something else, but specific observable behaviors. So you can't just call someone in and say, fact, you got a bad attitude. Impact, people hate working with you. Respect, I know that you have a difficult home life. Request, stop being a jerk. That's not going to work, because that doesn't give that person any concrete behavior that they can change. Stop being a jerk is not behavior. It's not specific enough for someone who doesn't know they're being a jerk to identify how they're being a jerk. So how is that attitude manifesting itself? So here's an example of how an attitude manifests itself. When you're in a meeting and you're in a department meeting, and one of your librarians, every time you say, we're going to do this thing, they roll their eyes. So eye rolling is a specific observable behavior. So you can make a note of that. When I said we're going to start serving the daycares 4 days a week instead of 3, you rolled your eyes. That is a fact. Impact. When you roll your eyes, that sends the message to me that you're not on board with this decision and you think you're not going to support it. Respect. I understand that you've been a librarian for 20 years and that you've been serving children for those years and that you have a lot of experience with daycares. Request. But I need you to get on board with this idea and support it and stop rolling your eyes at meetings. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. I'm looking at the notes. You can put anything in here. You just have to remember that the fact, I know facts are tricky these days, but you have to take that fact back to a specific observable behavior or event, something that we all agree happened. I have documentation that you clocked in at this time 5 times, or I observed in a meeting we had on Thursday, and I observed in the meeting we had last week on Tuesday that this behavior happened again, and this is how we need to address it. So stick to the specific observable behaviors and think about what that impact is on you, on your staff, on your services, on your patrons. And for some people, that they don't even know that that's the impact. Like if this woman's been rolling her eyes in meetings for 10 years, my God, she may not even know she's doing it. But if you tell her that it's getting in her way of being successful in her role, hopefully that will spark some change. Okay. Catch them being good. Okay, so you've all heard, you need to praise in public, and what's the other one? Redirect. It's not, but anyway, so you basically get people in trouble in private, you praise them in public. Well, that's true. You really want to look for ways to acknowledge the good work that your staff do. And here's the thing. Nobody wants to get an atta-girl for doing something stupid or for doing their job or for showing up. What you have to do as a supervisor is you need to get to know your staff. You need to understand what is it that they're proud of? What is it that motivates them and makes them happy to come to work every day, and find a way to call out exceptional service in that area so that that person knows, hey, they get me. My boss understands what's important to me, and they saw it. They noticed. People want to be seen. They don't want to be patted on the back for showing up. They don't want a participation trophy. People want to be acknowledged and praised and appreciated for the things that are important to them and the things that keep them coming to work every day. And I think it's easy to get kind of in this habit of insincere praise. And it's not a terrible thing to, there's a difference between praise and courtesy. Saying thank you to someone for filling the copier is perfectly appropriate. But giving them a service award for filling the copier is probably a bit too far. And we all do this. There are organizations where they have like employee of the month, and they simply go through the list, and everybody's employee of the month on a rotating basis, and you have to scramble to come up with a reason that nasty Anita in the basement, I shouldn't say that, it's a real person, that this person who isn't nice to anybody needs to be able to park closer for her month of employee of the month. So make sure that you're paying attention to what it is that your staff value about their work, and find something to praise in that, rather than just doing a blanket thank you to everyone on a regular basis and ticking off, okay, praised everybody today, check, got that done. So make sure that you're sincere and that you know your staff. Make any comments?
Yeah, Kim says that cheapens.
It does. It does. You really, it needs to be meaningful, and people are motivated by different things. Some people hate it. Mm-hmm. They don't ever want you to make them stand up in a meeting to be identified mm-hmm. as doing this wonderful thing. They'd rather be set on fire. So maybe slipping that person, bringing them a Starbucks if they like Starbucks, and just saying, hey, one-on-one, hey, I noticed that you did a really nice job the other day when you were interacting with that mother that was upset because her little boy fell and needed a Band-Aid. So here's your favorite Starbucks. Appreciate what you do. And you move on. It makes a bigger impact. Hey, we're doing pretty good. We talked about a little bit in the first part about not always thinking that you're right. So one of the things that you need to actively do is admit it when you're wrong. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to kill you. Sorry, I guess we're going to the next one. But always it's not, being able to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, let's do your thing, is very important in building rapport with your staff and making them trust you. So be the shield. Welcome to management. So your frontline staff are not paid or employed or anything to be yelled at by the public, by each other, to have anybody be mean to them at all. Your job is to stand between your staff and when these things happen. Now, they don't always tell you, right? So a lot of times you'll hear about something later and you'll say, why didn't you call me? I would have come down and talked to that person. And the sad fact is, and you've probably all experienced this, they're not going to be as mean to me as they would be to you. Once you call a manager in, that patron typically de-escalates because, I don't know, there's a variety of reasons. But your job as the leader, as the manager, as the team leader, is to make sure that your staff know they can count on you, and for you to pay attention and intervene when something is escalating. And that's kind of where you can see a Seidel. Seidel doesn't always have to be for a redirection. It can simply be to save someone from crazy patron number 2. We all have our special patrons. They're not all, our favorites, but we all need to share dealing with them. So make sure that you're there and your staff know they can count on you.
What about being the shield from higher administration or board?
Oh my God, yes. So if you're a department head and you notice that your staff needs to be your business and the administrator needs to go to you if there's a problem with one of your staff. That doesn't mean that, like for me, I'm a library director. So if I see something happening at reference when I'm walking through, I'm going to intervene because it's something that affects direct patron contact. But then I am not going to then call that person to my office and rip them a new one for what happened. I'm going to talk to their manager and let you handle it because your job is to block for your people. That is your team. Those are your chicks. That is your circus. Those are your monkeys. And so your job is to be between the director or the assistant director and that staff. And if you see that person talking directly to your staff members, you need to ask why. Hey, I saw that you were talking to Brad at the reference desk the other day. Is there something I need to know about? And the only way that will work, depending on how that director, assistant director, administrator is to insert yourself into that relationship. They shouldn't be doing it, and a lot of times it'll be innocuous, but you need to have enough, your manager needs to know that you will stand up for your staff, but that you will also redirect your staff, because your administrator is there to support you in the work that you're doing, in the same way you're there to support the work your staff is doing. Does that make sense? That was a really great point. I'm glad you brought that up. I see someone made a comment, the board can be very hard on staff. What? Oh, see, I would be having a little conversation with my board if they were hard on my staff. Their job is to rip me a new one and then let me rip staff a new one. So that's something that a director has to, it's delicate. It's delicate, but if you hear about it as a library director, you really need to intervene on it. And but here's the hard truth. If you're not the director and you observe that and your director's not receptive to that feedback, there's nothing you can do. Just be as supportive with your staff as you can and say, I'm really sorry you had that experience. Next time Mr. Smith comes in, please call me and I will interact with him. I'll take care of it. But yeah, the board should not ever be directing the actions of staff or giving them a hard time about anything. They should be going to the director who then takes care of it from there. But again, if you are not the director, do not ever go to the board. That's their job. Does that make sense? Jane, so sorry. Sorry, I'm looking at the comments. So this is a very important one. You have to, it's like that fake Gandhi quote, which I don't think is real. Be the change you want to see in the world. You have to model the behavior that you want to see from your staff. If you want people to provide exceptional experiences to the public and to take a problem-solving approach and be friendly and smile and welcoming, if you are not that way, they will not be that way either. So it doesn't matter how big of an introvert you are or how much you are head in the clouds thinking about the renovation or whatever. When you're walking through the public area of the library, you need to make eye contact. If you're expecting your staff to do this, you need to make eye contact with the public, with the staff, say hello, greet people, be friendly, offer assistance, etc. It's going to make a much bigger impression if your staff see you doing something than it is if you're just sending out memos or emails saying everybody must smile and greet the patrons when they come in, except for me, because clearly I don't do that. I mean, that's not what you put in the email, but that's what you're telling people through your actions. You've got to make sure that you are responsible for providing the model for what your staff do when they interact with people. It's going to make a much bigger difference if they see you doing it once than if you tell them 10 times.
Someone just commented it starts at the top.
Yep, absolutely. You set the director or whoever, the boss, the supervisor, sets the tone for the organization. And it makes a big difference. Okay, I'm all done. It's 10:55. Oh my God, that's so perfect. Any questions?
And I just want to remind you, I'm going to put up a link to your LEU, so please stay signed in. Once we get through the questions, I can do that. We have people typing here. Do you recommend finding a mentor?
Yes, I think that the thing with mentors is it's better if they develop naturally, right? So, and I would say this: never complain with people that you work with. I mean, I say never, but we all do it. But if you can find someone who's in an equivalent position at another library, and you can meet them at ILF conferences, you can meet them at state library meetings, however you do it, having someone who's in a similar position, who you can bounce ideas off of, who you can get advice from, is so critical. And I think that having a relationship with someone else who's more experienced in a mentor fashion can be really, really helpful. But I don't know how effective it is when we have like blind date mentoring. You know what I mean? Where you're matched up through a mentoring service. I know that there are a lot of folks here in Indiana that have had success with that. I know ILF tried it. I don't know if State Library does mentoring matchups, but I would just recommend going to meetings and sitting next to someone who's going amen sister at the same stuff you are, and then you guys can talk together about issues you're having, etc. In organizations that are large enough, if you're comfortable, there's a lot to be said for peer-to-peer support. So it's not inappropriate for you to talk about issues that you're having with your staff with managers at the same level. So you could talk to the adult services manager, but there's a whole level of trust that has to exist there. And if you're new to the system, that's really hard. So I would recommend finding a circle of folks who do the same job that you can, maybe meet up with for drinks after a conference or something, and just bounce stories off of each other and get assistance that way.
Someone commented district meetings are a good place to find a mentor. Also the ARSL.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's one of the big reasons to go to that stuff. And we have so many opportunities now with webinars like this or remote kinds of training, but it does take away that networking component that's so very critical.
All right, I don't see any more questions coming in. I'm going to go ahead